This is a first for me. I haven't tested this yet. Ah, yes. That is so sick. Have you ever found yourself having a random idea and then you start playing around and you start tinkering and then you lose 20 hours doing that thing? Well, this video is the result of that. Let's see what those results are. And I can tell you now, it's pretty freaking cool. This is the 3DFX Voodoo 2. This is a 26-year-old graphics card that came out in 1998 that essentially changed gaming forever. It also changed gaming for me forever. When this came out, this was one of the cards that I had. It just unlocked a whole world that I didn't know existed. The thing is, if you don't own period correct hardware, it's very hard to use something like this in the modern age. But what if I told you there was a motherboard that was currently out that you could put a modern CPU in that would allow you to use a Voodoo 2 with no adapters and no weird trickery, and in a way that just works. Let's do a 3DFX thing.
This video is brought to you by VIPSCDKey.com. Have you ever installed Windows 11 only to see the watermark of death? You don't need to fork out a couple of $100s for a key. You can grab one from today's video sponsor, from VIPSCDKey.com for 1/10 of the price. You can use our code GEAR to get 30% off for this month only. How good is that? That takes that already cheap Windows 11 key and makes it even cheaper. It's easy as placing your order. Bingo bango. You've got your new key on your orders page. You chuck that key into the activation screen and you're good to go. No more watermark of death. Use code GEAR to get 30% off for this month only. Link in the description. On with the video. Back to you, Nick.
Before that, for the uninitiated, or if you're just not old enough to know about this stuff, here's a little bit of a history on 3DFX Interactive. All right, let's journey back to the 1990s, the era of floppy disks, dial-up internet, and amazing CRT monitors. In this technological landscape, there were giants roaming the earth: 3DFX, Nvidia, and ATI. 3DFX burst onto the scene in '94, founded by Ross Smith, Gary Tiroli, and Scott Sellers. In '96, they dropped an absolute bombshell, the Voodoo graphics card. It was a game changer. It brought hardware accelerated 3D rendering to the masses and it set the gaming world ablaze. But as 3DFX celebrated its triumph, a new challenger emerged. It was Nvidia, founded by Jensen Huang. You know, the guy in the kitchen with all the spatulas. Nvidia was like the dark horse of the graphics card race back then. They were cooking up their own bit of 3D sorcery.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, what we got here is the world's largest graphics card.
And they were determined to dethrone 3DFX and claim the crown for themselves. ATI was also in the mix. You probably know them as AMD now. They were flexing their muscles with their own lineup of 3D graphics cards at the same time. But in '98, 3DFX unleashed the Voodoo 2. It was an absolute beast of a card. It increased its graphics memory from 4 megs up to 12 megs over its predecessor. It was around 15% faster overall and introduced us all to a little thing called SLI. This card was a technological marvel, but as the 90s gave way to the new millennium, 3DFX found itself facing some financial troubles. In a shocking turn of events, Nvidia swooped in and acquired all of 3DFX's assets in 2000, effectively ending the company's reign as the king of 3D. Yet, the legacy of 3DFX lives on in every frame of modern gaming, and without 3DFX, the gaming landscape would be vastly different today. Over the weekend, I tweeted and we did a community post talking about this picture here you're seeing on your screen, right? And I basically asked what is right or wrong with this picture, and almost nobody really got what was going on except for one really smart person. This is the Gigabyte B660M D3H, and it's a modern motherboard, MATX form factor, supports Intel's 12th to 14th gen CPUs. It's got DDR4, it supports M.2 drives, and it also has another secret, a regular PCI slot. I bought this motherboard about 18 months ago for a TrueNAS server, and I recently decommissioned it and pulled it out, and I forgot that it had a PCI slot. When it was sitting on the desk the other week, I was thinking to myself, I wonder if my Voodoo 2 that I had in my retro gaming PC would work on this and I wouldn't have to do anything strange to get it to work, and it kind of led me down this rabbit hole. That's not the only thing with this board. It also has VGA for integrated graphics. One of the commenters on either a tweet or the community post mentioned, they were like, how are you getting that card to work? Essentially, you can use the VGA on this board as well. So I'm gonna put this together so you guys can see that there's no trickery going on here. Here is my test bench, or one of the test benches that we use. This is running the Core i5-12400. The reason why it has integrated graphics, and I can just use a stock cooler on it. It's not going to overheat. I don't need to have some fancy cooling solution. This is all set up and ready to go because it did take a little bit of tinkering to get up and running. This Voodoo 2 was a card I was running in my Pentium 200 MMX retro gaming PC with Windows 98, and it was giving me a few issues. One of the good things about running this in a modern operating system is it allowed me to diagnose what the problem with the card really was. First of all, when I started to test all of this, this would not render anything in 3D. I'd have a lot of issues with the card and it wouldn't work half the time. What I discovered was the card wouldn't initialize for two strange reasons. First of all, the edge connector on this card was filthy. I had to clean it. I cleaned it and it was okay. Mind you, the card would detect in Windows anyway. The other weird thing I found was, maybe I've been a bit rough with this card over the years, but 2 pins on one of the TMUs were touching, and I had to separate them with a thin blade. And surprisingly, without having to do any intricate soldering, I was able to fix it just by doing that. I thought this was going to be a bust because I was tinkering with this for so long, but let's cross our fingers and hope that it still works after me pulling this out and showing you the card. I noticed something. This is really finicky with making contact in the slot, to the point where if I was unplugging a VGA cable while this was initialized, it'd crash the card. It wouldn't crash the whole system because of the way that PCI works. And the Voodoo 2 is very different to a lot of other graphics cards you've ever seen, ever, for a few reasons. First of all, the Voodoo 2 is not really a graphics card at all. It's a 3D accelerator card, which means this doesn't render anything in 2D at all. That's not the purpose of it. It is to render things with its own Glide API or OpenGL exclusively. The way this does this is no video output until you launch a 3D title. The way this works practically is you plug your monitor output from your VGA to this input on the Voodoo 2. That means when you're using Windows or DOS or any other operating system, the signal will be passed through to the Voodoo card, and then your monitor plugs directly into your Voodoo card, right? That's how it worked. Not only that, if you wanted to have 2 Voodoo cards, you could run SLI with this connector on the end. This is the OG SLI connector. NVIDIA bought this technology from 3DFX when they acquired them back in 2000. So there's a lot of things that you know about actually originate with 3DFX. I've got this really basic VGA to HDMI converter. The problem with this is it doesn't support some of the lower resolutions. It'll do 800 by 600 no problem. Because of the age of this card being 26 years old, it doesn't know what to do with some of the higher resolutions coming out from modern graphics cards. I'm gonna use a portable monitor, see if that works. But I know that this works if I just go straight from this to HDMI out and I do a manual switch. Now, when the system boots, typically I found that the pass-through from the Voodoo 2 will work no problem. We'll just see what happens here because I'm very curious to see if it's gonna work. Oh yeah, see, it's booting. This is using the VGA pass-through from the Voodoo 2. There is a couple other tricks, but basically I just want to see if we get a Windows desktop and oh yes, it works. Okay, the portable monitor works. Yes, this is a first for me. I haven't tested this yet. Yes. That is so sick. You can see that the resolution is probably 640 by 480 in Windows 10. Right, so the way that the drivers work is in Device Manager, you'll notice that the card here is detected. I've already installed drivers. I'll link to the drivers that I used in the description down below if you have a Voodoo 2 and you want to try this out with maybe a PCI adapter or whatnot. But when I show you what the issue is, it's Windows cannot verify the digital signature of the drivers. So what we need to do is we need to disable driver enforcement. And the best way I found to do this is by putting Windows in test mode. It will not allow you to initialize third-party unsigned drivers in test mode, but it does make a lot of the other things easier. We need to go to the recovery options in Windows to allow us to disable driver enforcement. And the way you do this is you go to recovery, you go advanced startup, go restart now. We'll let it do its little thing. You go troubleshoot, advanced options, startup settings, and then restart. When the system restarts, it gives us some additional startup options. And the one that we want to enable is, or rather disable, is disable driver signature enforcement. So hit 7, and then when we get into Device Manager again, we're going to see something different. You'll see now under Sound, Video, and Game Controllers, the Voodoo 2 is working. Okay, what does that mean for us? Well, it means we can play some retro games. The great thing is some of these are on Steam and they still support 3dFX's Glide API, especially Unreal Tournament. This one was no surprise to me because I'd done this on a retro PC before, but essentially we can launch the Steam version of this game. And now it's clicking over to the 3dFX card. You can see that the resolution's changed to 640 by 480. It's a little bit dark, but it's working. That is so freaking sick. Oh, I love that I get to share this with you guys. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do a screen record of this with a capture card so you can see it in all of its 3dFX glory. Here's the Unreal Tournament 99 intro.
In 2291, in an attempt to control violence among deep space miners, the New Earth government legalized no-holds-barred fighting. Leandri Mining Corporation, working with the NEG, established a series of leagues and bloody public exhibitions. The fight's popularity grew with their brutality. Soon, Leandri discovered that the public matches were their most profitable enterprise. The professional league was formed. A cabal of the most violent and skilled warriors in known space, selected to fight in a grand tournament. Now it is 2341. 50 years have passed since the founding of Deathmatch. Profits from the tournament number in the hundreds of billions. You have been selected to fight in the professional league by the Leandri Rules Board. Your strength and brutality are legendary. The time has come to prove you are the best. To crush your enemies. To win the tournament.
All right, here we are, ladies and gents. Unreal Tournament, we're in the menu. Now, just to show you that this is truly working, we'll go to Preferences, and you can see Video Driver, 3dFX Glide for Windows. That's right, ladies and gents, we're running the game in Glide. Now, there are a couple limitations with 3dFX cards, especially the Voodoo 2. First of all, 16-bit color depth is the maximum. We can crank the resolution, but I think it's going to be quite hit and miss. We'll see if we can get 800 by 600, which I honestly don't think is going to work with this little converter thing. And if it does, I'll be very surprised. Oh, it is working in 800 by 600. Well, there you go. At 60 Hertz. Okay, that's fine. That's what this card was good for anyway. All right, we've got a little frame rate counter in the bottom. I hope you guys can see that. It's looking like it's running, it's very difficult to see, but around 20 FPS, which, to be honest, at the time, especially for a game like this, was pretty revolutionary. The year this game came out was 1999. The year this card came out was 1998, so not much time between it. And at the time, this was completely game-changing. And the OGs out there will hear the song that is playing right now on this map. This is one of the most iconic video game songs of all time. It's called Foregone Destruction.
First blood. Headshot.
Unreal Tournament isn't the only game that uses Glide that you can still play. Well, the VGA pass-through stopped working. After closing Unreal Tournament, I couldn't get back to the desktop, and now I've got the pass-through hooked up again. Yeah, it just doesn't want to work. It's in Windows, I know that, but it's kind of locked the frame buffer up to show the BIOS options, and that's it, but that's okay. To show you that there's no other trickery going on as well. Even modern versions of Quake II still support 3dfx's Glide API. Now I'm going to launch Quake II now, and you'll see what happens is this monitor will spring to life as soon as the Voodoo 2 is initialized. So we'll see now, right? I said spring to life. There we go. In the video options, you can see that it's using 3dfx OpenGL. This is still using the 3dfx card, but you know, that's just how it worked. All right, let's get a bit of a time demo going on here. I think it's from memory time demo 1, and then map demo 1.dm2. Am I remembering that right? Oh, it looks like I am. So we're running a little bit of a benchmark now just to see what the frame rate's like. This is in 640 by 480 as well. I'll do some screen captures of all this so you can see it in its native glory. But you can see there, we hit 55 frames per second, which is pretty incredible. Let's crank the resolution up. .8 FPS, that's more than playable for Quake 2. Not competitively, but you know, 26-year-old 3D accelerator, not too bad at all.
Pods launched. Establish communications. Reported 80% failing vital
And this should technically work with Glide as well. Yes, nice one. I've put the FPS counter up the top as well so you can see what the FPS is. And surprisingly, it's quite good. We're getting like over 70 FPS most of the time, but I think that's because we're in this map that is a bunch of tunnels and stuff, and we're not outside, so it doesn't have to draw that much in front of us. Here's the thing with using a 3dFX Voodoo 2 on modern hardware. Not everything's going to work. You have to remember, this is 26-year-old hardware. The fact that it works at all is exciting enough. The other question is, should you even bother doing this with modern hardware? And I'm going to say this, and I've said this many times in the past. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. When I tried to do something like run Half-Life on this with the Steam version, it's completely impossible. There's no way to select a different graphics renderer when you load the game up. I tried a lot of different things for many hours, and there's just no way to do it other than me downloading a copy of the original retail version and doing it that way. But that's not really the point of this video. I wanted to show what it was like if you were to use modern versions of these games, whether or not they still supported 3dFX. And I've got to say, Unreal Tournament is easily the best example of this, because even after all of these years with the Steam version, it still includes support for 3dFX. Other games like Return to Castle Wolfenstein, that in its Steam version doesn't support it anymore. The same thing goes with Quake II. It doesn't technically support it, but I do own copies of both of those games, and I own original retail versions. So that's why I showed it here. Mainly the comparison I wanted to do was like, could you, if you really wanted to? Yeah, you could. But should you? Probably not. But it is cool. Like I said, it is really cool. I have a few other ideas with this. Let me know your thoughts. My other idea was, I was maybe going to do it for this video, but I think it's dragging on for a bit too long. I was going to install like Ubuntu or something like that, use Virt Manager and KVM, and pass this through to a Windows 98 virtual machine and use it that way. I think that would be quite cool too. So let me know if that's something you want to see. Otherwise, don't worry about it. I won't bother, and I might just do it in my own time. While I know I'm definitely not the first person to do something like this with modern hardware, every single attempt I've seen at this has been with modern-ish motherboards, maybe even up to like 4th gen Intel, and using some type of adapter to do it if it's anything newer. But the fact that you can still buy a board with PCI is quite interesting. Now, there's a couple reasons why they still have boards that support PCI. Firstly, industrial equipment, some of it requires it for controller cards and that kind of stuff. So instead of you just having to throw away all your old stuff and never being able to use it again, they have PCI slots on this stuff to support that kind of use case. And so you can use a more modern operating system. The truth is, it's mainly really not designed to run Windows with a PCI card in the slot. Yeah, it's doable, but this is more for industrial applications that use Linux, because Linux is not going to kick up a stink about whatever is plugged into a PCI slot. If it's got a driver present, it's just going to work. And that's just how Linux is. Windows, on the other hand, especially with Windows 10 and driver enforcement, and Windows 11 and driver enforcement, and if it's a legacy piece of hardware without a current driver, it's going to be a bigger pain in the butt to get working. This is something that you'll find with a lot of obscure hardware as well. You can technically sign the drivers yourself, but that's a whole nother video for a whole nother day, and something that I don't think you guys would be that interested in exploring. I really wanted to get this to work in Windows 11, but I wasted about 5 hours trying to get it to work, and yeah, it was just essentially a big fat waste of time in Windows 11. If you find these kind of videos interesting, let us know if you want to see more of this kind of stuff. I've got lots more weird and obscure retro hardware that we can talk about and do videos about here on the channel. But mainly, let me know what your first experience was with gaming in 3D and what your first ever 3D accelerator was. Mine was this right here, the 3dFX Voodoo 2. Yeah. I'm your boy Nick with Gear Seekers, exploring some really weird stuff. You peek, we seek, and yeah, I can't believe this actually somewhat works. It's not very practical at all. I would not recommend doing this, but you can do it. But should you do it? I guess you guys are going to have to answer that one for yourselves.